power.
All the way back in 1996, the Nintendo 64 changed the way myself and millions of others saw video games. Gone were the day of 2D sprites and 16-bit processors, only to be replaced with breathtaking 3D graphics and more immersive gameplay. Now, back when I was a kid, and I opened up my shiny new Nintendo 64 on Christmas morning 1996, it was a pretty easy setup process. Hook up the yellow, red, and white cables to the back of my clunky old CRT TV, and I was off to the Mushroom Kingdom. And let me tell you, back then these graphics looked absolutely amazing. Every polygon looked sharp and beautiful, the colors popped, and the controls were tight and responsive. This was the pinnacle of video gaming, and I never thought it could get better. So here we are, over 20 years later, and the Nintendo 64 still holds a very special place in my heart, and many other game collectors too. In fact, I'm currently in the process of obtaining every Nintendo 64 game ever released. While my collection looks pretty darn good on the shelf, I've been struggling with the best way to actually play these games, and that's where the biggest issue with the Nintendo 64 comes in. The Nintendo 64 routinely output video at 320 by 240 or 240p, with a few games that could actually pump the resolution up to 480i. This resolution looked great on a CRT TV, but now that we're in the era of high definition, the old composite connections are practically all gone from modern TV sets, and the ones that do support it, it leaves a lot to be desired on a visual front. But luckily, that's where the EON Super 64 comes in, the first of its kind plug-and-play HDMI adapter for the Nintendo 64. And let me tell you, this thing is an absolute godsend for collectors like me. Now, unlike other HDMI mods for the Nintendo 64, there's no physical modification whatsoever you need to use the Super 64. It's plug and play. So essentially, just take the adapter, plug it right into the AV port on the Nintendo 64, hook up an HDMI cable, and you're off to the races. Now, this is not the first HDMI solution we've seen for the Nintendo 64, but by far it's the easiest. The EON Super 64 takes S-video signal from the Nintendo 64 and scales it up to 480p. Now, I know that's not necessarily the highest resolution ever, but 480p coming from a Nintendo 64 looks absolutely fantastic, even on a 4K display, which is what I've tested this on for the most part. Now, for this review, I've tested many games: Super Mario 64, GoldenEye, Banjo-Kazooie, and the biggest thing I was concerned about was what was the input lag going to be like for this device. And I'm very, very happy to report there's no input lag whatsoever from using this device, at least that I've seen. I've played GoldenEye for hours using the EON Super 64, and every shot that I fired felt absolutely perfect, and most importantly, it felt just like it did back when I picked up the game when I was a kid. And that's really the important thing with a lot of these adapters that you see nowadays, especially ones that do scaling. Some of them have minor lag, and luckily this one doesn't seem to have any of those issues. Now, my absolute favorite part about the EON Super 64 has to be its slick mode. On the side of this device, there's a small button that if you push it during gameplay, it smooths out all the rough edges on most Nintendo 64 games. Now, in games like Super Mario 64, you can really see what this does when you take a look at text. So take a look at the very top of the screen where you can actually see how many lives Mario has, and you can really see what this smoothing feature does. It does the same thing for character models as well. Now, it's a little bit difficult to see what it does for Mario, but when you're putting this on a bigger screen, it's really apparent. Now, for a lot of purists, this might not be the mode that you want to use, but personally, this is my favorite way to use this device. In fact, every game I've played so far, I've had to turn this thing on because, in my opinion, it just looks so much better. So that being said, who is the EON Super 64 for? Well, it's for people like me. It's for Nintendo 64 collectors who really want to play their original cartridges on their TVs. And yes, I know with emulation and other devices, there are other ways to make this happen, but like I said before, personally, emulation isn't really for me. I love actually taking a cartridge off my shelf and playing it on my original hardware, which is why I absolutely love this device. But with a $150 price tag, the EON Super 64 is definitely not going to be for everybody. But for me personally, it's a lot easier than having to do an HDMI mod where I have to solder and potentially ruin my Nintendo 64. Like I said before, from an ease of use standpoint, this thing really does the trick. And if you're into the slick mode like I am, I think you're really going to be impressed with what this can do with its smoothing technology. Now, if you're interested in this device, we have a link in the description down below. You can go to EON's website and learn even more about this unit. But like I said, it definitely gets a huge recommendation from me. Alright, that's it from this review. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay wired in. Bye guys.